Welcome back. As promised, we're going to talk about the Canes, or as the camera can see right now, Can. So, the Carolina Hurricanes are on a 6-game road trip currently, and they've gone through the 4-game swing of Western Canada. It did not go well. They have 2 more games before the road trip's done. But I wanted to look at how road trips have negatively impacted their record so far. They are 14-12-1. And I still think Carolina's going to be right there at the end of the year. They're still one of the favorites to win the Stanley Cup. I don't think that's going to change, but their road record hasn't been fantastic. So I'll talk about individual players, but I want to talk about these road trips because it's fascinating. Now, first, they had their opening night game at home, and then they go out to the West Coast, and they're playing pretty much right away. And I felt bad for them during this first road trip because it felt like, that's a few time zones over, and it must be hard to get acclimated to that. So October 14th, they had a 6-5 shootout victory in LA. They led 3-0 in the first, and then they do get that shootout win, but it's not a pretty win, right? Aho had a goal and an assist in that game. Then they go into Anaheim the next night. They lose 6-3. Anaheim off to that strong start they had. And for Carolina, they trailed 3-0 in the first period. So they had the really good start against LA, the really slow start against Anaheim the next night. Teravainen with 2 goals in the loss. Then 2 days later in San Jose, so it's 3 games and 4 nights, they win 6-3 in San Jose. So they're 2-1 so far in this trip. They did trail 3-2 after 2. They needed some goal scoring in that third period. Jarvis ended up with 2 goals. So they kind of survived that one, really. Then they go to Seattle on the 19th, so they had 1 day off in between, and they lose 7-4. And again, this is a brutal road trip for a team from the East Coast. I have talked for years about teams from the West Coast going east, and how tough that can be, and I acknowledge it can be the same going west. They did trail 3-1 after the first period against Seattle, so slow start there. Slow start in both the games against Anaheim and San Jose. Jarvis had 2 goals and an assist in that 7-4 loss against Seattle. Then they go to Colorado on the 21st, so it does not get easier. They lose that one 6-4. They scored first. Kotkaniemi had a goal and an assist, but yeah, they lose 6-4. And then they go to Tampa Bay. They had 2 days off before the game in Tampa, where they lost 3-0. There was 1 goal in each period by Tampa. Kochetkov saves 20 out of 23. And so a road trip that started 2-1 ended up 2-4, right? So again, they needed a shootout to beat LA. The other win on that trip's against San Jose, and outside of that, it's all basically pain for Carolina. Now, the second 6-game road trip of the season that they're currently on, they have 2 games left in, is also fascinating in that on December 4th, they lose 2-1 against the Winnipeg Jets. They trailed 2-0 in the second period. Necas had the 1 goal in that game. Then they go to Edmonton on the 6th. So again, it's a lot of games in a short period of time for them. And they lose 6-1 against the Edmonton Oilers on the 6th. They trailed 4-0 after the first. It was an ugly game. Stahl had the goal in that game for Carolina. And then against Calgary the next night, they lost 3-2. They led 2-0 after the first. So this was, again, they get off to that good start. It's like against Winnipeg, they had all those shots, and then Winnipeg gets a shot and it goes in the net. And that has to be frustrating for Carolina players to have the good start, and then it doesn't matter. You're still trailing. So Bunting and Nason scored in the game against Calgary, and then in last night's game, December the 9th, they lose 4-3 in Vancouver. I was tied 3-3 in the third period, but they never had a lead in that one. Martinook, Shea, and Nason had the goals there. So they're 0-4 on this current trip. On Tuesday, they're in Ottawa, and then on Thursday, they're in Detroit. Then they come back home, they play Nashville, Washington, and the Vegas Golden Knights. There isn't really a game over their next 5 that I look at and say, well, that's an obvious win. That being said, they get back into their own time zone with the games against Ottawa and Detroit. They do have a couple of days off before the game against Ottawa. We'll see if they have time to reset and focus their game. Because outside of these 2 road trips, 2-4 on this one, 0-4 on this one so far, they're 12-4-1. So it's interesting with Carolina because as soon as they get back home, my guess is they start racking up wins again and they start going back up the power rankings. It's been very much like a heartbeat watching them this year where they're rising and falling. So their overall record, as I said, is 14-12-1, but we'll take a closer look at it now. At home, they're good. Away from home, not so much. They're 8-2-1 at home, and they're 6-10 away from home. Against the East, they're 9-5-1. Fascinatingly, against the West, they're 5-7. Because we always hear that the West isn't as good as the East. In this case, Carolina has struggles against the West. not so much against the East. The team's save percentage is .867, which I pulled from Hockey Reference. Now, that includes empty net goals because the league average is listed at .899. So, again, that includes empty net goals there, but it does show that Carolina not getting the kind of goaltending you want. They're just not getting the right. Whatever you need on the road, they haven't had it, right? Again, 2-4 here, 0-4 here. Going outside their time zone seems to be a difficult issue. So which player is it that's having the most struggles on the road? And it's hard to name one guy off. So for Aho, he has 4 goals at home and on the road, but the numbers are a little different. So at home, 11 games, 4 goals, 9 assists, 13 points. He's a +7 at home. On the road, 13 games, 4 goals, 5 assists, 9 points, and a -6. For Jarvis, at home, 11 games, 3 goals, 8 assists, 11 points. He's a +6. On the road, actually, his goal scoring is better. In 16 games, he has 6 goals, 2 assists, 8 points. So his points production's lower, goal production's better, but he's a -8. So again, plus minus is fun to look at in situations like this, where it is situational. Natchez, 11 games at home, 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points. He's a +2 at home. On the road, 16 games, 3 goals, 6 assists, 9 points, and a -12. So, again, if you're a -12 in 16 games, I understand the grain of salt thing, but you shouldn't be -12 in 16 games. Teravainen in 11 games at home, 6 goals, 5 assists, 11 points, and a +5. Away from home, 16 games, 5 goals, 2 assists, 7 points, and a -5. And yes, it is worthy of mention that they've had 16 of 27 games on the road. Obviously, they're going to have more games at home from here than on the road, and that's tough. It's tough for any team to have a lot of road games, and again, I mentioned how there's not a lot of time in between games here. Ronta, 4-1 at home with an .857 save percentage. That's not great. On the road, he's 2-4 with an .862 save percentage. Bewildering that the save percentage is better for both of their current goaltenders. I don't have Anderson on the board because we don't know when Anderson's come back. He's only appeared in 6 games. But Kochetkov at home, 2-1 with an .860 save percentage. On the road, 2-5 with an .881 save percentage. So their save percentages are higher on the road, but their goals against average is also higher because Carolina tends to allow more shots on the road than they do at home. They're one of the best teams in the league when it comes to preventing shots, and maybe part of it is because they're goaltending, right? It may very well be Rod Brind'Amour saying, look, the goaltending hasn't been great, so we need to do our best to protect the goalies, which is a little bit easier when you're getting those last line changes and you're getting your matchups at home than on the road where the home team gets that last change and gets to decide who's playing against who. One thing to keep in mind here, Tony DeAngelo is reportedly on the block. Makes sense. He's been a healthy scratch plenty this year. I don't think there's much room there for him on the blue line. They have too many defensemen. And his plus-minus number is ugly as well. I think it's 16 games he's played, he's a -10. But again, for DeAngelo, he's just returned to Carolina. Now he's likely on his way out. Where does he go? And then 2 others I wanted to mention here because this is a team that's had its struggles. It needs everybody pulling in the same direction. Orlov, I think, has had some struggles. 27 games, 1 goal, 10 assists, 11 points. He's a -8. And not playing as well for Carolina as he did last year for Boston after the trade deadline. Boston just could not afford to keep Orlov around. Svechnikov in 16 games, 1 goal, 10 assists, 11 points. He's even in terms of plus-minus. Svechnikov takes too many penalties. I know that there are some who believe that the officials call penalties on him too often, but I think he's picked up a bit of a reputation, just throwing that out there, and the 1 goal in 16 games simply will not do. This is a player who should be a 30-goal scorer every year, and I've said before, Svechnikov has the amount of offensive talent that he could be a 40-goal scorer. He could be a 45, 50-goal scorer if he got on a really good run. The 1 goal in 16 games is troubling. And I do wonder, like with Carolina struggling right now, and in the event that they end up being a disappointment, maybe they barely eke their way into the playoffs, which again, 2 games above 500, there's a chance you either don't make the playoffs or you barely eke your way in. Do we see major changes with this team? Could we see a guy like Svechnikov become available? My answer would be probably not. But again, when you look at how this team's performing and some of the guys that just aren't giving them what they need, Svechnikov's a player that in the unlikely event that the Carolina Hurricanes ever said, you know what, we got to change things, and they make him available, teams would line up for his services. He is an offensive player. He is a young player. He still has a ton of potential. But for Carolina, a team that was early in the season seen as the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup, this has been a very disappointing run, and they do need to turn this around. So I would be interested to know from people watching this. So now that they're done with the West, like you don't have anywhere else in the Pacific time zone to worry about. I don't have Arizona on the board, but like I said, the Pacific time zone, they're mountain. So is that it then? Is Carolina just going to recover from here, and we'll look back and talk about how, yeah, it was really, really, really weird how they had those long road trips and just didn't perform particularly well? Or will we look back at this and say it was a warning sign that maybe this team wasn't quite the contender they were expected to be? Let me know your thoughts on where you would put the I don't like to say blame, but who do you think is most in need of an adjustment? The blue line, the goaltending, or is this somehow to do with the forwards as well? Like I mentioned, the forward numbers haven't been as good away from home as they are at home either. So I think there's a lot of blame to go around. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. I just figured Carolina was kind of interesting to look at because of these road trips that haven't gone their way. But let me know your thoughts. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.